Hello and welcome to this week's Wild Spirits News. My name is Sibylle and today I have a very special mission for you. I had the idea for this when I remembered a time many years ago when I was cycling through Connemara. That's a beautiful landscape in the west of Ireland where I live these days. And at the time in Connemara there were still rather deserted places with no house in sight. That has changed. There has been a lot of building there in the last couple of decades. But back then I came across a stretch of moor land that was so deserted that I cycled along in complete and utter silence. There wasn't even a bird singing for about 20 minutes. And I got a little nervous even. And that's when I realized that this was the first time in my life, and I was 19 at the time. It was the first time in my life that I had experienced absolute silence. Now in our day and age it's become almost impossible to come across silence, but even relative silence has its merits, and your mission today is to learn how to use the power of silence to skyrocket your productivity, your health, and even your longevity. Your first task is called unplug. You see, noise doesn't always come in the form of actual sound, of actual noise. It's also the distractions, the many impulses, the sensory impulses. Just think of walking through a city and from every corner flashes another light and another billboard and people and traffic lights and everything. There are so many sensory impulses, it's impossible for us to process it all, and that causes stress. And we unfortunately have got into the habit of exposing ourselves to even more stress through our electronic devices, and the internet, which can be so beneficial, when it's overused can be a stress factor. The never-ending news feeds, the never-ending info that we are constantly bombarded with is too much for our brains. So this task is to find some time to unplug. Either use an evening a week or even an entire, or maybe at least half a weekend day, to completely switch off all electronic devices. This can be really hard, but you know what? We lived like that only a couple of decades ago and we survived, so it's possible. Don't just mute it, switch it off. If anything important happens, it'll still be there 2 hours later, trust me. At first this might seem like you've cut off your own hand or your own arm. But stick with this, do this regularly, and this is your task, to find an evening, a day, or to find a weekend to actually implement this and see what it does to your life. Your second task is called entertainment. We have everything at our fingertips these days, not just music, but also movies and Netflix and whatever else. We are constantly entertained. To the point, I love music and I love watching a movie, but there is a point when it becomes a background noise, a constant level of background white noise in your house. And that is not very healthy for you at all. I've seen this in many houses that have a TV. I don't even own a TV anymore, but I've seen it in many houses. They eat dinner or they do other things and the TV is always on in the background. Now, if that's your habit, I would like to invite you to think this over and use all these entertainment devices for what they were meant for, to entertain yourself with a movie and then switch it off, or to listen to an album of music and then switch it off. Your task is to start with maybe an hour of silence one afternoon or one evening where there's no music, no movie, no TV, and you just sit there. We tend to these days get really nervous because we always think we need to do something or we need to watch something and concentrate on something. If you can, try some meditation. Meditation doesn't have to mean that you empty your mind completely. Light a candle and gaze at the candle flame for 10 minutes. Set a timer for 10 minutes. Start off like this. Sit in silence for an hour and read a book. Or do some knitting or whatever. Resist the temptation to do this with lots of people in the room. Obviously, if your spouse, your partner, or your children are around, that's fine, but don't make it a party, because that is again a lot of distraction. Get into the habit to regularly spend at least an hour in silence. And the third task is called the power of silence in nature. Now, nature obviously has sounds as well, but your task here is, I mean, unless you're like the way I was in a moorland that doesn't even have birds in it, this was very weird, and you might not have access to that, but that's not necessary. If you're like in a forest and hear the bird song, or if you're at the beach and hear the waves, that's fine. Natural sound are fine, but your task is to find a bit of nature where you can spend time in, where you will not hear human industrial sounds like cars, like building sites, these kinds of noises, but only natural sounds. And you should aim to do this ideally at least once a week, at least try it once or twice a month. So try to schedule this into your life. And if you're one of these people who say, I have no access beyond 3 hours drive or so to anything where I'll only hear nature sounds, it might be time to rethink your living situation. I'm not saying you have to give everything up and cut and run and move and live off the grid for the rest of your life. But think about it in the longer term, what changes you might be able to make, because this kind of human noise that we're constantly confronted with has deep and profound impact on our health and on especially our psychological health and the levels of stress that we experience. So that's your third task. As you can see, today's tasks were all impossible to do during the video. So this is all these 3 tasks. For once, you can't do them immediately, but I would like you to put them into practice. And so your 4th task is to, as usual, to let me know what your ideas are about this, what you're going to implement, what maybe you have done something similar or you're already doing something similar. So just hit the reply button on the email that you got the video with and let me know, and I'll get back to you. I love to hear from you. If you didn't get a video, if you didn't get an email to get the video, this way around, then that means you're not a part of the Wild Spirits community yet, and you should definitely join us. Go to wildspiritscoaching.com and fill in that little form. You will get a 100% spam-free newsletter. I promise you that. You'll get 1 email per week. And that email contains the link to this week's video, lots of additional information, resources that are recommended like books and other things. And sometimes it contains special offers that are exclusive only to my subscribers that nobody else will ever get to see. So go to wildspirits.com and sign up. You can also Google Wild Spirits Coaching. That'll get you to my website as well. Thank you for watching.